This is the world of The Secret of Secrets, written by Dan Brown. A world where knowledge is not stable, where history is not fixed, and where every answer is only the beginning of a much larger question. And this story does not open with chaos. It opens with order. A world that appears fully structured, where institutions function normally, where science is trusted, where history is documented, and where most people live with the assumption that everything important has already been explained. But this stability is only surface level, because beneath it, there exists another layer of reality. A layer that is not publicly discussed, a layer built on symbols, codes, patterns, and connections between ideas that most people never notice. The story begins with a man who does not experience the world in a linear way. He does not simply see events. He interprets them. He connects them. He searches for relationships between information that other people treat as separate. This is not a man driven by power or ambition, but by curiosity. And in worlds like this, curiosity is never neutral. It always leads somewhere. The first disruption appears in the form of information that should not exist in its current form, not because it is magical, but because it does not fit with the established understanding of history and knowledge. It is a message, a pattern, a structure that repeats across different sources, artworks, ancient texts, architectural details, and symbolic references that appear in different contexts but point toward a common unknown center. And the moment this pattern is recognized, the story changes its nature. It is no longer about finding information, it is about understanding why the information is arranged this way. Because now the question is not what does this mean? The question becomes, who arranged this meaning? And more importantly, for whom was it arranged? The investigation begins to expand, not in one direction, but in many layers at once. Each new clue does not simply reveal an answer, it redefines the questions that came before it. The main character moves through different environments, not as a tourist, but as someone who is following a structure that is invisible to most people. Ancient places that look like history, modern institutions that look like knowledge, and private locations that hold information not intended for public interpretation. And with each step, the reality becomes less certain, because nothing is isolated anymore. Everything is connected. A symbol in one place appears in another. A reference in one text corresponds to an image in a completely different context. A historical claim suddenly links to a modern structure that should not be connected at all. And this is where the core idea of the story begins to form. That knowledge is not random. It is structured. And structure always implies design. But design does not necessarily mean conspiracy. It means intention. And intention means that someone, somewhere, has control over what is visible and what is not. As the investigation deepens, the main character realizes that he is not only discovering information, he is entering a system of information management. A system where some knowledge is public, some is partially hidden, and some is fully protected from interpretation. And this creates a constant state of tension, because every discovery can be both a step forward and a step into something unknown and potentially dangerous. At the same time, other forces begin to appear, not always directly, sometimes through obstacles, sometimes through distractions, and sometimes through people who seem to be part of the same search but have very different intentions. Because when knowledge has value, it attracts competition. And the story gradually transforms from a pure search for truth into a race between different interpretations of that truth. Every clue becomes a decision point, every discovery creates new risks, and every answer opens a new level of uncertainty. And yet, the most important shift does not happen outside. It happens inside the main character. He begins to understand that the world he thought was fixed is actually interpreted, that history he thought was complete is actually curated, and that knowledge itself is not just found, but organized. And this realization changes everything, because once you see that reality is interpreted, you can no longer accept any single version of it as final. Everything becomes multiple layers. Every truth has a context. Every context has a source, and every source has a possibility of being part of a larger design. And as the story moves toward its final stages, The question is no longer simply about finding what is true, but about understanding how truth itself is structured in this world. Because if knowledge is arranged, then access to knowledge is controlled. And if access is controlled, then understanding is never fully free. And this is where the story stops being just an adventure and becomes a reflection on information itself. And now the final question is not about the characters, it is about the listener. If the world you live in is built on layers of information, some visible, some hidden, some interpreted, then how much of what you call truth is actually complete? And if that question once enters your thinking, then this story has already done what it was meant to do.